we do not all have the same experiences, at least when looking at the specifics. And that statement is true. It's kind of hanging out there all by itself with not a lot of, perspective around it or whatever. But what I mean is, we can have an experience. One person has an experience. It doesn't mean every person's experience is the same way. So one person may hear God's voice audibly. It doesn't mean everybody hears God's voice necessarily audibly. Is it possible? Yes. Is it the way it's going to be? No. It's not how it necessarily works. So in Acts chapter 9, we read a story of the conversion of Saul, which is the Jewish name for Paul, and it teaches us several things about the voice of God. So what's up with Saul? Saul was persecuting the church, right? He was working at it. He was looking for things that he could go get them on. Right? He was interviewing people and digging up dirt, doing whatever he could to bring charges, right? And he has this experience where he's been doing these things. So he's been around the church, he's been seeing stuff, and a number of the commentaries talk about the days before this experience for Saul. And one of the things was the death of Stephen, because he had been part of those that essentially authorized it to happen. And so there's speculation that had a great impact on him, watching Stephen die the way that he did, being stoned and yet not giving up his faith, right? And it's very difficult for me to ever talk about that situation without remembering the song back from probably the 80s that said, Stephen saw Jesus standing there just a stone's throw away, But it apparently had an impact on Paul or Saul, whichever way you want to refer to him today. And so it says he was journeying, and this is in chapter 9 of Acts. It says he was journeying, and he came near Damascus, and suddenly there shined round about him a light from heaven. And he fell to the earth, and he heard a voice saying unto him, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? Okay? Now, first of all, please note that God knows his name. I've said this several times. God knows your name and will frequently speak to you and call you by name. Okay? Secondly, he asked him, he said, why do you persecute me? Who was Saul persecuting? The church. And yet, God said, you're persecuting me. Why? Because he is the church, right? It says, so why are you persecuting me? And the word persecute here is it means to pursue after or chase after. And it can also mean to flee. Isn't that weird? Right? Why are you chasing after the church? Why are you chasing after me? Right? So, yes, his intent was wrong. But God's asking him, why are you chasing after me? Okay? And so he says, Saul says, and who art thou, Lord? Who art thou, Lord? Kind of already knew, huh? And the Lord said, I am Jesus. Okay? I am Jesus, whom thou persecutest, who you are pursuing, who you are chasing. and on some level, who you're trying to flee from, right? Before we come to Christ, we're both pursuing and running, aren't we? And then it says, and this is not in every translation of the Bible, and I want to spend a little bit of time here today. It is hard for thee to kick against the pricks, or you'll see it's hard for you to kick against the goads, or but you don't see it in every translation. A lot of the newer translations just skip that whole, like he never said it. No, it's red letter, so it seems kind of, why would you take away words that Jesus spoke, right? But it says it's hard to kick. Now, when you talk about the goads, that you're talking about on a plow, there's some implements there that if the horse kicks backwards, right? They're like or tines, yeah. But if the horse kicks backwards, they're going to kick those. So they're designed to be a deterrent from the horse kicking back towards the farmer or the one running the lines. Okay, that's what those are. And when it talks about the prick, it's talking about those things that are things that would sting. Okay, those things that would sting. Again, goads, they're kicking back. It's something that they're going to hit, and the idea is it causes discomfort, and they go, "Oh, I better not do that anymore. That hurts." Pricks, sting, the things that hurt, right? So he says to him, "Why are you chasing after me in spite of the stings, in spite of the hurts?" And one translation of this can actually refer to in spite of your natural tendencies. Right? In spite of doing the things that you just are prone to doing no matter what. Your nature. Why are you both persecuting, chasing after, and fleeing from, in spite of your natural tendencies? Why are you doing that? And I don't know why the other translations have kind of left it out, but it's kind of important for us to understand. God knows your heart. God knows your motive. And when God speaks to you, oftentimes what he's trying to do is address those things. We talked about him coming to the garden saying, "Adam, where are you?" And God knew where Adam was. But Adam needed an adjustment, needed to know where he was himself. Many times that's the way God's voice speaks to us. Hey, you need to pay attention here. My wife and I were talking about, the tendencies that we have as Christians to get into coincidence. Okay? This might hurt a little, so apologize ahead of time. Okay? But we say, well, if it works out, it must have been God's will. And if it doesn't work out, it probably wasn't God's will. And what we actually mean by that is if it's easy and it makes me feel good, it was probably God. And if it's uncomfortable, it probably wasn't. So I need you to put your thinking caps on for a minute and tell me how many times in the Bible when God speaks to people, he says, "Hey, if it feels good, do it." Oftentimes what God asks us to do is difficult. Oftentimes what God asks us to do, we're not sure we can do it. In fact, we might even say, I just can't do it. Except God, right? Except God changes our outlook, right? So if you fall into the trap of if it's easy, it must be God, and if it's difficult, it must not be, what you've actually done is you've fallen into the trap of what seems right to you. And the Bible says that the end of that is sudden destruction. If you were all that and a bag of potato chips, why are you here? I mean, is it just to show everybody else how good you are? Or wouldn't God want to just take you to heaven and, get you out of the way so he could deal with all the rest of us imperfect folks? Right? Be careful. I'm just a warning. Be careful of allowing yourself to start to think along the lines of it's easy, good, makes me feel good, it must be God, and if it's not, it must not be. Because that path will lead you to destruction. Yeah. So that's not to say, I have to walk around feeling, a victim in every situation, like, oh my goodness, I'm just, so abused. And God wants good things for you. But the good things he wants for you begin with your attitude being adjusted towards his way and not your own selfish, narcissistic way. Okay? So, what does he tell? Here's this great experience. Bright lights. Speaking to him. And it says, Saul, and he, trembling, astonished, said, Lord, what will you have me to do? He's already had a change of heart. Okay, I recognize who you are. What do you want from me? What do you want me to do? So he said, what do you want me to do? And the Lord said unto him, arise and go into the city, and it shall be told you what you must do. So this great big, entrance, if you will. And he has a change of heart. What do you want me to do? And he says, just go to the city and wait for further instructions. Very simple little baby steps. We're just getting started. God can speak to someone who's new and give them a whole roadmap to things, but probably not, because you're just starting your relationship. But then God can speak to somebody who has more experience, more relationship with God, and he can speak more detail because they can hear. They understand more the heart of God. I'm going to drive you nuts with this, but this is why you need to spend time in the Word and why you need to spend time in prayer, because that's how you get to know God and his nature. All right? And so that when he speaks, you have that instant ability to check it. God is not going to speak something to you that is against his word. But if you don't know his word, how are you going to know that? Right? It's the problem. It used to be, they always said, women had this problem, and I can tell you it's universally, it's not women, it's just people. But, you go into the mechanic because, the car's making a funny sound, and he goes, well, it's, your muffler bearings are shot. It's going to cost quite a few dollars to fix that. And if you don't know, Courtney, there are some cars that actually have what you could almost call muffler bearings these days. Is that correct? No, it's not correct? I guess there's just no muffler bearings in the world. So, the fact of the matter is, if you don't know, you can be taken advantage of because you don't know. Now, if you do know and you go to a mechanic and he says you need to replace your muffler bearings, you can say, you, sir, I am not speaking to anymore. Goodbye. Yeah, no money for you. So he gives them baby steps. Go and wait for further instructions. All right? But when he goes to leave, he's blinded. He's been blinded by the light. See, he was blinded by the darkness before. That's why he was doing all the persecuting. Now he's blinded by the light. Yeah. He's blinded by the light. So he says, go and wait. I mean, if I'm Saul, I'm thinking, well, what else am I going to do? I can't say anything. Right? But he sends him there. He's a changed person. His outlook is different, right? So he sends him, and it says, and the men which journeyed with him stood speechless, hearing a voice but seeing no man. And I've seen lots of discussion about that. Well, they heard a voice, but they didn't understand the words because, for them, they didn't hear it this way or that way. Bottom line is they heard someone speaking to him, okay? And Saul arose from the earth. When he opened his eyes, he saw no man, but they led him by the hand and brought him into Damascus. And he was there 3 days without sight, and neither did he eat or drink. He'd had an experience, okay? And there was a certain disciple at Damascus named Ananias, and to him said the Lord in a vision, God's voice isn't always just an audible sound that comes to you, but again, if you are spending time knowing God by reading his word and time in prayer, you'll be able to recognize God's leading, God's voice, God's spirit in more ways than just one. Okay? And he said, behold, I am here, Lord. Speak, your servant hears. And the Lord said unto him, arise and go into the street which is called Straight, and inquire in the house of Judas of one called Saul of Tarsus, for behold, he prayeth. And he's seen a vision, a man named Ananias coming in and putting his hand on him that he might receive his sight. This is a lot more than go and wait. This is very specific. I want you to go here, take this street, you're going to speak to this person, he's been already told this. Right? A little more relationship. But what did it say? There was a certain disciple, follower of God. Someone who's got a relationship. And Ananias answered, Lord, I have heard by many of this man how much evil he's done to the saints at Jerusalem. And he has authority from the chief priest to bind all that call on thy name. This is not easy to do. This is not, well, if it happens, it must be God. This is, holy smokes, what are you asking me to do here? This is risky business. Right? And the Lord said unto him, go your way, for he is a chosen vessel unto me to bear my name before the Gentiles and the kings and the children of Israel, for I will show him great things he must suffer for my name's sake. He's getting ready to put Paul into action. He's getting ready to write a whole bunch of the Bible. He's getting ready to have someone who's going to go through all kinds of things, and yet he's going to stand and not give in. He's getting ready to create a true, mighty apostle. And yet he's telling him, you need to go talk to him. He said, man, I've heard bad stuff about him. Are you sure? And God's saying, yes, I'm sure. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm telling you what the future looks like. I'm telling you how important this person is. This is a big deal. But it's not an easy deal for Ananias, is it? He's putting his life on the line to go even find him, let alone deliver the message. Ananias means has favor. God, if you like me, why are you asking me to do something that could kill me? Right? Because I know you. And you can do this. And I can talk to you. And I can have a conversation with you that's more than go and sit. And when you go and you tell this to Saul, he's going to be changed by it. He's already changed, but he's going to be changed by it to the point that he's actually going to be able to hear more than just go and sit so well that he'll be able to write a big chunk of the Bible. See, God will ask you to do the difficult, but he'll also make sure you're equipped. And sometimes that's where we start getting lost in the if it feels good, do it thing, is we don't see the equipping. We don't see that we have the right tools to do the job God's asking. But sometimes what God's telling us is take the step, believe the word, and I'll take care of the equipping on the fly. That's what he's going to go tell Saul. Right? I mean, that's really what he goes and delivers the message is, hey, Saul, I got a plan for you, and you'll be equipped as we go. And you ever wonder why things happen, and it's like, this is difficult. Why is this happening like this? Well, it's because it's part of what God's doing to get you equipped. Right? People that compete in sports train, and the good ones train harder than they'll ever play. Right? They train harder than they're going to play. You run with weights or whatever it might be, or if you are in a time sport, you double the time that you train versus the time you're going to play so that you build endurance. You lift greater weights than what you're going to lift. I think of, because this is a day where we have the Super Bowl to talk about, some of the stadiums that can be so loud. And the teams will practice on their practice field with loudspeakers blasting loud noise at them and stuff, so that they have to get used to that environment so they can function in that environment. If you can't quiet your mind and your soul and listen to God and trust when you're sitting in your prayer closet at home, how are you going to do it in the real world when things are chaotic and going on? I remember my mom and dad, when they hadn't gotten married yet, they were getting ready to get married, and in fact, they had gone to drive over near Vacaville to see a jeweler about a diamond for my mom's wedding ring. And so they were driving together. And the Sunday service before they went, my aunt, some of you met my aunt, Betty, that she was starting to suffer with some dementia and stuff when you got to meet her. But anyway, she had a word for them, and she said, I want you to know that God tells me that there's something coming it's not good. It's not good, but it's not going to be unto death. Now, we all love it when we get a word from God in church, and the word is, oh, you're wonderful, you're doing great, everything's fantastic. Hear what I'm telling you. God frequently is calling you to do something. He's calling you to action. He's calling you to change. Very seldom does God just say, hey, everything's wonderful. He might say, be encouraged, don't be afraid, but, because he's trying to draw us closer to him, okay? And so on their way there, they were on Green Valley Road. Anybody know that road off of I-80 now? They were on Green Valley Road when someone came across the double line and hit them head on. And my dad was thrown out of the vehicle into the roadway. And my mom, mind you, they're not married yet. My mom got out of the car, and she went over, and all the cars were stopping and stuff. And And when she went over to him, his eyeball was literally laying on his cheek. Okay? And she knelt down and she said, "Can someone help me pray?" And they all just looked at her. They didn't know what to do. See, in the chaos, right, that's when the experience gets real. And she knelt down and prayed and watched his eye go back into its socket and everything. And he was actually in the hospital unconscious for almost 4 days. But his church friend drove over to Fairfield to be in the hospital room with him. And my dad came out of that unconscious state, hearing his friend Harold Metcalf read the 23rd Psalm, because he just sat and read the word out loud to him. If you can't deal with the little things, the simple things, how are you going to deal with it in real life? You've got to prepare yourself to hear God's voice. You've got to prepare yourself to know God's nature. You've got to prepare yourself for dealing with real world. Okay? So here's the thing. Hearing God's voice, is it easy? Yes, it's easy to hear God's voice, but it's difficult to respond sometimes. Now, can it be hard to hear God's voice? Yes, because we have to quiet ourselves. We have to get all those things out of there. But if God has to, he can just speak to you out loud. He can blind you with a light. Is God's voice going to lead you on the path of the unchanging? Probably not. He's probably going to challenge you to step up a little higher. He's probably going to challenge you to forgive. He's probably going to challenge you to pray. He's probably going to challenge you to adjust your attitude. He's probably going to challenge you to do something you're not sure you can do. And so one of the questions you can ask when God speaks to you is, does this require growth? Because almost always when God speaks, it's going to require you to grow in faith, in maturity. Something like that's going to be part of the equation almost always. Because what he wants is for you to draw closer to him, to grow closer to him. So, read the Bible, spend time in prayer, and when you hear God's voice, get ready to move and do specifically what he says to do. Because, if Ananias had gone to the road called Crooked to speak to somebody named Fred, this wouldn't have worked out so well, right? Listen and obey. Follow God's voice. And that's it for this week.